Morning, Aiden. I'm going to start up in just a moment. All right, what I promised to do then, starting right now at 9:30, is to go over the two problems for your pretest. Hopefully everybody has had a chance to at least look at it. I know I got an email from one or two people last night saying, hey, I'm just totally confused as to where to start, etc. So I'm starting from the beginning. All right, so I'm going to create a new project. It will be a Windows Forms application. All right. And I want to put it into my pretest folder. So under my AWD 1100, where is it? Fall 2022, your name, I've got a folder that's called pretests. And inside of there, I've got my pretest. So that's what I want to use. So that's where I'm going to save this. All right. And it says the name. So I'm going to call this pretest 02-01. I don't think I've got anything by that name. All right. Now I'm going to, just to be sure, because I've been told in the past that sometimes when I change like that, the share goes away. So I'm just going to make sure that it's still there. So you should be seeing the pretest right now and the blank Visual Basic form that's on there. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to build my interface. That's, especially when you're given the interface, that's a pretty good place to start. All right. So I've got just two labels. Let's come in here and let's do what I usually do. And that is I'm going to click on the form. I'm going to right mouse click on the form. I'm going to choose rename and I'll call this FRM temp converter. Yes, I want to save it, all the references to it. And then I'm going to quickly change the background color. Let's try green. That's fine. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and bring in my labels. There they are. You already know this. You've already heard this, but I'm going to immediately change my auto size from false to true. So that'll be one label right there. I'm going to make it a little bit darker so that it stands out. There we go. Then I'm going to copy it and paste it over. I'm going to put it over here. All right. So underneath that, I need to have two text boxes, one under each label. There's the first one. There is the second one. Okay. Underneath that, I need two buttons. And underneath those two buttons, I need two more buttons, one under each button. All right. Now I'm going to immediately come in here and I'm going to change the size of everything by highlighting all of it, going over to font, changing my size to 20-point bold, Arial, and hit OK. All right. So that is, by no means is that perfect, but it looks decent, I guess, as far as setting up my interface. Now I may have to change a couple things. I don't think I will though. So I'm just going to do a Control A to highlight all my controls, lock my controls, and start building. So this first thing is going to be the Fahrenheit temperature. So I'm going to call it LBL temp. And the text on it will be FAHR temp. All right. And the one underneath that, or the next one, will be the Celsius temp. So I'm going to call this LBL cell temp. All right. And again, it'll say cell temp. So those are both done. If I want these centered in the box, I can highlight them both, go down to text align and choose the one in the middle here. Now they're centered. Doesn't really matter. All right. This will become TXT far temp. This will become TXT cell temp. And like I just did, if I want to, I can come over here, highlight them both. And notice that when I do the text align here, rather than showing me a picture, whoops, it just says, why is it doing that? There we go. Center. So that'll now be center aligned. And now I can create my 4 buttons. All right, this first one will be called BTN convert F to C. And that's what it'll say is convert F to C. Oh, looks like I should make it a little wider, but that's okay. We'll fix it in a minute. And this next one will be called BTN convert C to F. And again, it will say convert C to F. Again, these are both a little bit too small, so let's take everything that's in here. Let's unlock it and make it all a little bit wider. There we go. That'll be fine. And then lock it back up again. Okay, so I now have everything done except these 2 buttons. All right. And this one will be my clear button, so it'll be BTN clear. And it'll say clear. This one will be BTN exit, and it will say exit. All right, so my interface has now been built. All right, I did not change the text by the form, and I think I asked you to do that. So for the form, I'll go down to the text that says form 1, and I'll just type in temperature converter. So now that's changed. All right, so now let's see. I think that I will set my accept button to just assume I'm going to go from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Doesn't matter which one you choose. So that accept button, convert F to C, and my cancel button will be my clear, BTN clear, whoops. There that is, okay. And what else is there? I want to go down to my start position and change it from Windows default to center screen. And then finally, I want to set the tab order. So the tab order will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe that's not the best order in which to set it, but that's just the one I chose. So view, tab order, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, do a file, save all. And I haven't put anything else in there yet. I need my view tab order. But I should be able to run it, just make sure that it's coming up in the center of the screen and it looks right, and it does. Okay, that's good. All right, so the next thing I want to do, the clear is very simple. Clears that, and I'll just put the focus right there. Okay, so for the clear, TXT, which one was it again? It was that's F to C. TXT Did I change all my names? TXT far temp, TXT cell temp. Let's double check and make sure I changed all my names. And it looks like I have. Okay. So TXT far temp dot text, this over, equals double quote TXT cell temp dot text equals double quote TXT far temp dot focus. All right. And neither one of these are going to be read only. So I should be able to put something in here, click clear, and that all works. Good. There's a start. As I always do, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab my exit button text code, whatever you want to call it. That's that show message dialog. So put that in there. And there's that. All right, I should be able to again do a file save all and double check and make sure that works. Exit, no, exit, yes. Okay, so all of that stuff is done. I have built my interface. Okay, so everything is looking pretty good right now. So the other things that I have to do are these two buttons, F to C and C to F. Okay, all right, so I'm going to do them in the order, of course, would not matter. But one thing that I did do was I went out and I copied all of the text so that I could put it in there as a comment at the top of the program. So a program prologue, so to speak. And I'm going to paste that in. Now I'm not going to worry. If I keep hitting enter, I can get all the stuff in there. I don't care. So this is just the exact same thing. Whoops, the exact same thing that I gave you before. This is taken literally right from the test. So what do we want to do in here? All right. Well, we want to verify that the input is not empty. We want to verify that the input indeed is numeric and that's within range. We've already done this. I just did that. All right. So all these ABCs here are done. I've got to do these, but that is what we're going to do in just a moment. We want to have 4 constants. So I'm just going to grab those. I'm going to get an error doing this, but I'll fix it in a second. So I'm going to say const. Even though it's a whole number, I'll make it a decimal anyway. And that's min Fahrenheit, and that is -212. I'll have another const, decimal max Fahrenheit, and that's going to be equal to a positive 212. All right. And then we've got to do the same thing with our Celsius. So const, decimal, min cells, and that's going to be equal to, I guess we're supposed to actually use the word Celsius. That's equal to -100, and const max Celsius, and that's equal to, so the minimum was -100, and the maximum is +100. Okay, don't need that any longer. So looking at this stuff as far as what I was given rather in the requirements, again, I still have these to do. I get that. I've done all this. I've done all this, I've done all this, I've done this, and I am going to show you modularization, but first I'm just going to write it the way that we have been writing things. All right, so basically I'm not going to change anything. Okay, so we want to come in here and we want to, in fact, let's modularize it right away. I didn't do that, but I'll just do it right in front before your very eyes. So this is going to be clicking that Fahrenheit to Celsius button. All right. So ideally, we're going to want to run the Fahrenheit to Celsius formula that I have up on top someplace. All right. But I have to check to make sure that I didn't leave the field blank. I have to check to make sure that I didn't put something non-numeric in the field. I have to check to make sure that I put something within range. So in other words, I put a value between negative 212 and positive 212. If it wasn't empty, if it was numeric, and if it was within range, then I want to do the calculation. Otherwise, I don't want to. Okay? So this is the way I usually do this. I create a Boolean variable that I call keep going, and I set it equal to true initially. All right. Now I'm going to get a bunch of errors in here, but rather than writing all of the code in here, because it'll be fairly long, probably 30 or more lines. All right. I'm going to write this as different routines. So I'm going to come in here and say keep going equals validate bar temp not empty. Now, as soon as I do this, I get an error message because I don't have anything that I've written yet called this. So I'm going to write it right underneath. I'm going to write my own private. All right. Now this is going to be the name, but I'm going to be sticking whatever it returns into something that's a Boolean. So I have to say here bool, just like that. And you'll notice right now that error has gone away. All right. So that one's gone away, but I get one in here now. Why? Because it's expecting me to return true or false, and I'm not returning anything. I could right now just type in here, return true, and then you'll notice the error goes away. All right. But it would always be true, and that's not what I want. So what I want to do, all right, is I want to check and see if that value, whatever's in that text box, is empty. If it's empty, I want to return false. All right. Because it's empty. But if there is something in it, since this is called not empty, I want to return true. Now, there's a lot of different ways that I can do this. I like to make a local variable of type Boolean that I call retval, which is short for return value. And now I'm going to say if txt f to c or txt fartemp dot text dot trim, and we'll go over that in a minute. If that's equal to nothing, if that's equal to absolutely nothing, okay, what I'm basically going to want to do in here is set my return value to false. And then here, I'm going to want to return my return value. Now, that's incomplete the way it is, and I want to explain why, but first, I want us to play computer here. All right? So we've got this variable that we called keep going. We initially set it to true, but now we're saying that it's equal to whatever this returns. So this must return true or false. It must return a Boolean. All right? That return value, I just made it in here. I mean, I could have done this. I could have said return false right there. I could have put in return false, and then in here I could have put return true. So you might say, yeah, you could have done that, so why didn't you? Well, if you read the code that you see in front of you right now, if you read that code, there's only one return statement in my whole routine. That's what you should shoot for, is just one return statement. That way, if there's a problem, you know right where to go in case, like I said, in case there's a problem. Now, what would be nice is if this is empty, it would be nice to give the user an error message to let them know that. So I'm going to call show message. That doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to get an error. And I'm going to say text box cannot be empty. All right, so that'll be my text. And here it'll say empty var temp. Okay, now I get an error because, again, show message does not exist. So I'm going to write it right now. And I'm going to put it down at the very bottom. So I'm going to say private. It doesn't return anything. So the type of return is void. It's void of return type. And it expects a string, which has a message. It expects a string, which has a title. All right. And then all it is I do a message box dot show with my message and my title. Okay. Now, I could leave this as okay, but I'm going to put this as, yeah, I'm going to leave that as okay. Whoops. Should have just left it alone. Okay. But I'm mainly, when I write this, they're going to be errors. So I'm going to change that to error. And then let me move all this over so you can actually see it. Now, everything I've done right now may have confused the heck out of you. But again, play computer. I'm telling you to check and validate that that Fahrenheit temperature is not empty. If it is empty, I'm going to show it a message box that says text box cannot be empty, and it'll have a title on it of empty Fahrenheit temperature. In fact, I could put Fahrenheit. That's a little better. All right. And it'll return false here. Otherwise, it's going to return true. And there is that. So if you're at all confused, let me save it and let me run it. So I'm going to put nothing in there and I'm going to click the button. And notice what I get. I get a message that is entitled empty Fahrenheit temp, and I get an OK button. I get an icon for an error, and it says text box cannot be empty. And if I try it again, as long as I keep not putting anything in there, I'm getting that. But if I put something in there, now I don't get that error. But now we've got our second type of error. We want to make sure that what goes in there is numeric. So how do we do that? Well, if the text box was empty, then keep going is equal to true. I'm sorry. If the text box was empty, then keep going was equal to false, my error. If it's equal to true, it wasn't empty. There was something else in there. So I could either say, if keep going equal true, and then I could call another routine that I'm about to write. But if you want to say if something equal true, the shortcut is to just write it like that. All right. So now I want to validate that the Fahrenheit temperature is numeric. I've got to validate that there's a number in there. All right. And it's going to be very similar to this routine right here. So I'm going to grab that whole routine, copy it to the clipboard, and paste it in. Now, the name of this now should be this. So validate var temp is numeric. Okay. And right now I've got to change what's in here a little bit. But I am now, basically, I'm covering both of those situations now. Okay. So what do I have to do in here to check to see if something's numeric? This was in our book, but I did not do a stellar job of going over it. So I am right now. All right. I want my Boolean ret vals just like this to be true, but I'm going to create two more variables. A decimal that's called temp, call it whatever we want, it doesn't matter, and another Boolean that's going to be called result. All right, and I don't expect any of that to make sense to you. And my hope is after I show you this, it'll make some sense to you. All right. So let me forget about this. Just forget this is even here for now. All right. But one of the things that was in the in chapter, I think it was 4, was you could say result equals decimal dot try parse. All right. And we're trying to parse what is in txt Fahrenheit temperature, and we're going to put the output into temp. Again, I don't expect that to make a lot of sense to you. All right. So what's going on here? This is taking a look at what we put into the text box. If we get into this routine, there's got to be something in the text box because we already checked that here. All right. So what we're doing is we're trying to take what was in that text box and parse it or convert it into, we're trying to convert it into a number, a decimal number. If that works, we put it into that decimal number that we called temp. If it works, result is true. That means we were able to parse it or convert it. If it doesn't work, then result is false. So what we want to check here is if result equal false. But again, there's a shortcut for that. Rather than saying if result equal false, you can just say if not result. All right, and we change our message to text box must be numeric. And we'll change this to non-numeric Fahrenheit temp. But hopefully you see there's a lot of similarity between the last one we wrote and this one. But yet there are differences. So now when I come in here and I put in garbage, now notice it says non-numeric Fahrenheit temperature. Text box must be numeric. If I do it again, and I'm going to clear that out in a second, but if I do it again and put nothing in there, I get the other message, empty. All right. So one thing I want to do before I go back, and so basically one thing I want to do before I go back and do this is I want to say txt fair temperature dot text equals double quote. What did that do? That made sure that when I run the program and I put garbage in here and it gives me the message, as soon as I click OK, that should disappear. And it did. Not only do I want that to disappear, I want to make sure the focus is there. All right. So again, if I put nothing in here, nothing, and click that, I get that message. And I should put the focus back in there too. If I put non-numeric, I get that message. It clears it, and there is my cursor blinking. All right. So I should have come back in here. When I said ret val equal false, I should have said txt var temp dot focus. So if you look up on the screen here, what I have done, I'm almost to where I can get there. Not quite, but I have checked to make sure that that value isn't empty. I have checked to make sure that that value was numeric. All right. So put some comments in here. Max temp, max Fahrenheit temp allowed. And actually it's the minimum, so I'll fix that. This is the max F temp allowed. That should be min. This is the min centigrade temp allowed. And this, of course, then is the max centigrade temp allowed. All right. So when I come in here, this method is executed when the F2C button is clicked. All right. So this thing keep going. Sometimes it's called a Boolean variable. Sometimes it's literally called a flag. All right. And it's a flag that can be set to true. Oops. A flag that can be set to true or that it can be set to false. All right. So I'll put here call routine to validate text box not empty. All right. So this routine is going to return true if it's not empty and false if it is empty. All right. Here we're saying if it returned true, then call this. If it didn't return true, if it did not return true, I'm done. Just return. All right. Because something bad happens, so to speak. Okay. So this is, as it says, is going to validate that the temperature was numeric. So this method here validates that the F2C text box is not empty. This next routine that's in here, all right, this method validates that the F2C text box value is numeric. So I put a number in there. All right. So I've again handled 2 out of the 3 things that are in there. So the only other one I've got to handle is that it's within range. All right. You can see the program's getting much more complex and much longer. Right. So there's my F to C. Now, if keep going, meaning that my is numeric returned true, then I want to validate that the Fahrenheit temperature is within range. All right. In other words, I put in a value that's between negative 212 and positive 212. All right. So it's going to be very similar to this one here. So I'm going to take this and copy it. And I'm going to plunk it right down here below there. So this one is called validate var temp is within range. Right? So this validates that the F to C text box is greater than or equal to negative 212 and less than or equal to positive 212. That's exactly what this is doing. So if we already have got a variable in here that's called what? Let's see. This is temp. All right. There's a problem though. Temp lives, it comes to life right here and it dies right here. I want to be able to use that temp value that's in there. I want to be able to use that someplace else. I don't want to just use it in this routine. I'd like to use it in this routine. All right. So let's go and take it and let's make it global by putting it way up here. These were our, this is declare and initialize our program constants, but we have no global variables. So these will be our global, they're also typically referred to as class level variables. All right, and I'm going to say here, decimal temp. All right, by doing that, I can take the temp I have in here and I can get rid of it. I can still use it here because I'm using that global one now. Now temp now holds the temperature. That's good. That's exactly what I want. Why? Because I can say here if temp is less than min Fahrenheit or temp is greater than max Fahrenheit, I know I've entered something that's out of range. So I'm going to call my show message. And I don't want to say now text box cannot be empty. It wasn't empty. So I can just put in here temp must be, in fact, let's just say temperature inputted out of range. Temperature inputted out of range. And we're going to put in here OOR for out of range Fahrenheit temperature. Okay. So if that's the case, what do we want to do? We want to set our return value. All right. We want to clear out what was in there that Fahrenheit. So dot text equals double quote, and we want to set the focus. Now, your head might be spinning right now. You're like, geez, you're doing so much stuff. So let's go back and let's look now and see if we've handled all three error conditions. So if we put nothing in there, we get empty Fahrenheit temperature. Text box cannot be empty. Click OK, and there we are. If we put in something non-numeric, we get non-numeric Fahrenheit temperature. Text box must be numeric. And it clears out, puts the cursor here. If we put in a value that's too big, we get out of range Fahrenheit temp. Temperature inputted out of range. If we do it again and put a negative value in there that's out of range, we should get the same message, and we do. That's good. So now when we put in something like this, that's still out of range. Now we're ready to actually convert that and put it in here. All right, so if we got to that point, we are now ready to convert this. So what we have done so far is we wrote three different little small routines. One that verified that the temperature wasn't empty. One that verified that the temperature was numeric. Not non-numeric sounds weird. I'll just put here is numeric. And one that checks that it's within range. Now, we didn't do the C to F yet, but everything else here is done except this. All right. So we checked that it wasn't empty. We checked that it was numeric. We checked that it was within range. So if keep going, all right, that means in this case, all of our checks have passed. All right, then we're ready to figure out a Celsius temperature. But we don't have a variable to hold that. So I'm going to make one right now. In fact, I'm going to make that global. So I'm going to make a decimal that's going to be called Celsius. And I'm going to make a decimal that's going to be called Fahrenheit. The only one I'm going to use right now is going to be the Celsius one. So I can now come in here and grab my formula. Celsius equals that. All right, so let me go down and put it in there. Not only can I do that, I can also fill up my text box. All right, and this is the temp. All right, so we'll fix this in just a minute, okay? So TXT, what did we call that? This box right here is called TXT cell temp. So TXT cell temp dot text equals Celsius dot to string, and we'll do it to 2 decimal places. So let's figure out what the problem is here. It says operator cannot be when one is decimal and one is double. So I made one of these double, which was silly. And we have to figure out which one and fix that. So Celsius temp, I think that was in here. There we go. So we did temp. No, that's a double. That's a double. Oh, I'm sorry. When we do our calculation, this is 0.0 M, and this is M. There we go. All right. Now, hopefully you know this. 32 degrees Celsius, I'm sorry, 32 degrees Fahrenheit is 0 degrees Celsius. So let's test it with that one. First, let's make sure we didn't break anything. When it's empty, we get the empty message. When it's non-numeric, we get the non-numeric message. When it's too big, we get the out of range message. All right. It's funny, it still did it here, so there's something wrong there, but we'll fix it. All right. So when I do come in here and put in 32 and click convert, it says 0. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So what's left is to do it the other way. All right. So this should have said else return. All right. Now, if you remember before when I just ran this and I put in a really huge number, it gave me my error, but then it ran it anyway. It shouldn't do that. Well, there's still a problem. I got to fix this. Okay. So where is it? Else return, else return. Try it in here. Else, it shouldn't be necessary there, but we'll see. All right, so again, nothing, empty, non-numeric, non-numeric, out of range. Still doing that. I got to fix that. All right. And finally, within range. Okay. So the thing that's not working right now is it's doing that anyway. So we've got to fix that. All right. We'll fix it right now. So let's see. After I get done with this, one thing I do want to do is I'm going to set temperature back equal to 0. All right. Do I have to do that? There's nothing that I have to do. All right. But it should be actually 0 M. Okay. All right. Keep going, else return. Keep going, else return. Keep going, else return. All right. The only thing that's not working now is if I do put in a number that's out of range, it is still doing that, and it shouldn't be. So in my out of range, that must mean that let's look in the out of range. Red val is true. If it's less than a minimum or greater than a maximum, you're saying out of range. Red val is false. Clearing out the temperature, clearing out the focus. Here we had said red val is true. Here it should be false. and we are returning ret val. That's all correct. Within range. If keep going, do this. That should have said keep going equals. Now it'll work. There we go. All right, so half of it is done. I'm going to fairly quickly do the other half. Then I'm going to go back over all of it. All right, and then we'll take a break. So let me exit, and I'm going to write something similar to this. All right, I'm going to write something similar to this, but I'm going to write it for the C to F. Okay, now what you're going to discover in a later chapter, I'm going to duplicate some code here, except one is going to say Fahrenheit, one is going to say Celsius. When we get later on into the semester, you'll learn how to basically combine those into one. All right, if you say, I don't have any idea what you're talking about, you will in just a bit. All right, so I'm going to grab everything that's in here, and I'm going to copy it in here, but I'm going to have to make changes. All right, so I've got my keep going still. That's totally fine. Validate. Now I want to validate that the Celsius temperature is not empty. That's not written yet, so it's going to give me an error. Then I want to validate that the Celsius temperature is numeric. That isn't written yet, so that's going to give me an error. Then I've got to validate that the Celsius temperature is within range. That hasn't been written yet, so that's an error. And finally, this is going to have to be the other formula here, right there. So this is going to have to be okay. So this is going to have to be Fahrenheit equals the temperature times 1.8 M plus 32 M. Okay. And then the TXT far temp is going to be equal to that Fahrenheit dot toString. All right. Okay, so now I've got to come in here and write all these. Now I'm going to just comment out this line because we didn't write it yet. And I'm going to comment out this line again because we didn't write it yet. And now I'm going to write this one. All right. Now I didn't know whether or not to do this, but what I will do by the end of the period today is I will go and take all of this code and I will upload it to my GitHub repo. So if you want to look at it, you can. All right. I am not saying this is the only way to write this. I am not saying this is necessarily the best way to write this. What I am saying is this is how I wrote it. All right. That's why I'm saying, because people sometimes say, well, you know, I should do everything like you do it. Why? You should start to learn how to do it by yourself and write it that way. That's what you should be doing. So this first routine is going to verify that the Celsius to Fahrenheit temperature is not empty. But I've got to come in here, and everywhere I've been using far, I've got to change it to cell. So this is empty Celsius temperature. And this will be cell. Now, all I did was copy in the routine I'd written earlier, changed every FAHR to a CEL. Now, I'm not done. I'm far from done. But now when I come in here and I click here and I put in nothing, I'm getting my empty Celsius temp now. Text box cannot be empty. If I'm over here, empty Fahrenheit temp, text box cannot be empty. So I've got both of the text boxes being empty are now being handled. They are both being handled. All right. So the next one is what? The next one is the So we got the not empty. So now we've got to do the numeric. Again, I'm going to just copy the code from here. And I'm going to put it down here. But now this is going to be, again, C to F. And this is going to be validate CEL temp is numeric. All right, so this is CEL. And this will be non-numeric Celsius temperature. This will be TXT cell temp, and so will this. So now I can go run this, put my cursor here. It's now handled if it's empty. And if I put garbage in there, oh, okay, it did that. We'll have to fix that. All right. It actually did what it's supposed to do, but we'll have to, oh, I took that line of code and I commented it out, if you remember. Validate. So this has got to say keep going equals validate cell temp is numeric. So let's try that again. File, save all. And nothing. It's being handled. Non-numeric. Non-numeric. It's being handled. So I've got 2 of those 3 done. So again, I'm going to run back, go back into here, and where I'm validating that it's within range, I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I am going to paste that down near the bottom. And this has to change. Again, everything that's F to C is now C to F. And the range is -100 to +100. This is to validate that the Celsius temperature is within range. So it's going to be min Celsius, and it's going to be max Celsius. So that's an out of range Celsius temperature. And that'll be CEL. And that'll be CEL. All right, I'm almost finished. Okay, so file, save all. Let's just check all 6 error cases. Nothing in here. Empty Fahrenheit temp. Non-numeric Fahrenheit temp. Out of range. I'll have to fix that. Don't worry about it. We'll fix that. Out of range. Whoops, not there. Try that again. Out of range. All right, out of range. Now let's try the other one. Nothing. All right, empty. Non-numeric. Okay, that's working, and out of range. All right, still doing that. All right, then let's fix that. That'd probably help. Now I'm doing my range check. Out of range Celsius temp. And if I do this, whoops, sorry. Out of range Fahrenheit temp. All right. So now I just have to handle it. So if I put a 0 in here and I click, I've got that 32. All right. If I come in here and put in a 0 and click, -17, those are both correct. My clear works. My exit works. So let's take a few minutes and go over the entire program from top to bottom. All right. You've already seen this. And I did modularize the program. Do you have to modularize yours on your test? No, no, no. What I'm showing you here with modularization is what we'll be covering next week after you take your chapter 5 to 7 test, or 1 to 5 test. It's either chapter 6 or it's chapter 7. I don't remember modularization, but now I've shown it to you. So we came in here, we've got this GUI app, All right. And we can convert now a temperature input in Fahrenheit to Celsius, or a temperature inputted in Fahrenheit to Celsius or Celsius to Fahrenheit. We are checking every time to verify that indeed, all right, that neither one of those text boxes is empty, that both text boxes, whatever we input into is numeric, and that it's within range. We did all this stuff. So we set our tab order, we set our accept button, we set our cancel button, we set our start position. We changed the name of the form, and we changed the form text. We created a program prologue, which is what you're reading now. We created make that 4 constants: minimum Fahrenheit, minimum Celsius, maximum Celsius. Optionally, but just so you could see it, we did modularize the program, and we had our formulas right there. So taking it from the top, first thing you see in lines 44 through 47 are our 4 different program constants. Remember that when you declare a constant, and that's everything up to the equal sign. So declaring the constant is right here. But when you declare a constant in virtually any language I know of, when you declare it, you must also at the same time initialize it. So we have 4 program constants there that we have both declared and initialized. Then we have 3 different variables that are global or class level. They're global to the program. Why did I make these global? Because if you use them in more than one routine, you either must make them global or you must pass them back and forth. And we haven't really gone over that much yet. So I did it this way. All right. So this is I'm going to call it let's see. This is the inputted text. So the inputted temp, all right, made numeric. Not a great comment, but I'm just going to leave it like that. This is going to be the calculated Celsius temp. This is going to be the calculated Fahrenheit temp. This, of course, is what happens when we click the clear button. So again, here, this code executes when clear button clicked. And all it does is it goes up to my 2 different input areas, which are the one here and the one here. It clears them both out and it puts the focus there. All right. Then this is the code that runs when our exit button is clicked, and it's the same code we have been running. Right. And then we've got, it's not a small program. It's a couple hundred lines. So as it says, this method is executed when the F to C button is clicked. The F to C is, I'm attempting to convert F to C, or in other words, Fahrenheit to Celsius. All right. So I've got a Boolean flag here that I set equal to true originally. Okay. Then I say they take that Boolean flag and call validate Fahrenheit temperature not empty, which must return true or false. If it returns true, we're going to call another routine. And again, that should say keep going. That's before why it kept trying to do that calculation. So keep going as originally true. Call validate Fahrenheit temp not empty. If that returns true, then call validate Fahrenheit temp as numeric. If that's true, then call validate Fahrenheit temperature is within range. If at any time it returns false, those are the else's. So we just return. And I think this one here I could remove now. It's redundant. I'm just going to leave it there. So what do these routines do? The validate Fahrenheit temperature is not empty. One thing I didn't mention is this, that's trim. If I've got a name, so let's say I put in my name, okay? So let's say that right here, I'm just going to put a comment here. I'll move it in a minute. But let's say that I want to put in here Jeff Scott. But instead of putting that in, I put in I hit the space bar a bunch there, and I hit the space bar a bunch there. What trim does is it removes any leading and any trailing blanks. It does not remove blanks that are between values like that, but it trims it. That's exactly what it's doing. And you may or may not care, but I've read this someplace years ago, I believe. And that is the reason they did this is it used to be when people wrote HTML forms, when they wanted you to fill out a form to do something, a lot of people, if they didn't want to answer, they would just hit the space bar in all the fields. And sometimes it would still go through, even though it was just a space bar hit. This would keep that from happening. So the trim function trims or removes any leading blanks or any trailing blanks. So if it is empty, we are going to show a message box, and the text in that message box will be text box cannot be empty. The title of that will be empty Fahrenheit temp. We will take our return value right there that we originally set to true, and we'll set it to false, because it's to say that it's not empty right here is false. It is empty. All right. And we want to make sure when we go back, we set the focus back on the field that just failed. All right. When we do the next one, when we check to see whether or not it is numeric, we are using the try parse method. Try parse takes in two things: what it is you're trying to parse, and if successful, where do you want to put the result? All right. So when we do this, it's going to either return true, meaning it successfully parsed the number, or it's going to return false, meaning it did not successfully parse the number. If it returns false, it is not numeric. So if that's the case, it's going to run that code right there. And then the range check is just that. It checks and it says if the temperature that we entered was less than negative 212, or the temperature we entered was greater than negative 2, say that again. If the temperature we inputted was less than negative 212, or the temperature we inputted was greater than positive 212, we will again call it an error message, or however you want to refer to that. All right. And so we will input a message saying that it's out of range, and then we'd return false. Otherwise, we'll return true. Okay. And looking at the top here, if we get down to the bottom here, what does that mean? That means that all of our checks passed. It is not empty, it is numeric, and it is within range. So we do the calculation. And the other one is exactly the same, but we just go in the other direction. Now, that may be making your head spin. I don't know. But I believe, Aiden, you're the only one here watching live. Any questions on what I just did? Then hopefully it makes at least a little bit of sense. All right, it is 10 36. Let's just take 9 minutes, and because the other one, the program might have a little more code in it, but we'll come back and we'll do the other one at 10:45. So again, this isn't small, not a small program, 275 lines, right? So I'm going to do here a file, and I'm going to say save all. And then I'm going to come in, right mouse click on my solution, add a new project. This will be another Windows Forms app, and it will be called Pretest 02-02. All right. So I'm going to create that. I want to go and refresh my water. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. All right, let's start back up. And let me get back. There we go. All right, so I'm going to start back up and I'm going to do the next problem on here. Now, that next problem is to do with batting average. So I'm going to immediately click on here and I'm going to change the name of my form. Hopefully you can see my screen still. Otherwise, I can do another screen share. All right, but I'm going to click on my form, right mouse click, and rename, and I'm going to just, I'll call it FRM batting average. Yes, I want to change that. And we will immediately change this to batting average. All right, so that's all done. All right, so what do we want to do here? We want 3 buttons. Let's put, in fact, let's change the background color right away. Made the last one green, so let's make this one turquoise. That's fine. And let's first add my 3 buttons. And they are the standard calculate, clear, and exit. Okay, so we've got those. And next, again, we want 6 labels and we want 6 text boxes. Let's do the text boxes first. So I'll just make one of them here and move it over. In fact, what I think I'm going to do is right away, I'm going to make this bigger. I'm going to move those over to here and I'll somewhat center these. So here will be my text boxes. All right, and I will need 3 other ones. So my other ones will be over here. All right, and I need 6 labels. I may have to adjust this a little bit more, but I'm not worried about it. So let's go to my labels. Bring that up here, and then as I always do, I am going to reset the auto size from true to false. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger and a little bit wider here. About like that. And make it 1 shade darker. All right, now I'm going to copy that a bunch of times. Again, I may have to widen this out just a bit, but I'm not worried about it. In fact, let's just do that right now. I'm going to make this and move that way over here. I'm going to make these and these both wider. Okay, then I'm going to move. Come on, come on. I'm going to move these over. And I'll move these over. And I will move these over. All right. Finally, I'm going to do a Control A, and I'm going to change the size of everything in here, as I do all the time here, to 20 point bold and Arial. All right. Now, it's not perfect, but the interface is at least coming into place as far as I can tell. That up. It's looking pretty good as far as I can tell. Let's see. I'm going to try taking it and right now locking it into place with a Control A to highlight everything, right mouse clicking, and choosing lock controls. All right, I think it's okay the way it is. So let's start working with these. This one is my at bats, so it will be LBL at bats. And it'll say at bats. I'm going to just double check and make sure that my sharing is set. So now it should be. All right, so I've got at bats. This next one is hits. So I will call this one LBL hits. And it will say hits. I like that with the at-bats. I'd like it if it has a semicolon at the end, or a colon, I should say. So this one will say hits with a colon. And the next one will say average, a colon. And it'll be LBL average. All right. I'm going to take all of these here and I'm going to center them. Yeah, it's not going to let me. I'll have to do it like this. Now that's centered. What just happened here, but goofed it up somehow. And that'll be centered. What happened there? I don't know. LBL at bats. And I removed the text somehow. At bats. This was hits. And this is average. All right. Now let's make these the same. So this will become TXT at bats. This will be TXT hits. And this will be TXT average. All right, let's do the buttons next. So this one will be BTN calculate. And it will have the text of calculate. All right, the next one will have the text of clear. And it will be called BTN clear. And the last one will be called BTN exit. And it will have the text of exit. All right. So what's left are these. So this one here is highest average. So this will become LBL highest average. And we will put in the text for that as highest average. Okay. This next one will be lowest average. So we will change that to LBL lowest average. And finally, the last one will be LBL total number of averages. LBL total number averages. And this text on here will say, total $sign for number, so total number averages. All right, since I centered that, I might as well center all of these too. And not the way I did before, so I'm gonna highlight these, go to text align and set it to middle. Go to here, highlight these, and set the text align to be center. I think these are set already. Yep, they look like it. All right, so this one will be TXT highest average. This will be TXT lowest average. And this last one will be TXT total number averages. Now I'm going to double check as I always do in here to make sure that I've renamed everything. And it looks like I have. As always, I'm going to click on a blank part of the form. I am going to set my accept button to BTN calculate. I am going to set my cancel button to BTN clear. And I'm going to set my start position to center screen. All right. These three fields right here are all going to be read only. So I'm going to highlight them and go to the read only, double click. Now they are read only. And finally, I'm going to set my tab order to 1, 2. In fact, this is 2. That's a read only field as well. There's only 2 fields in here that I'm using where I'm inputting, and that's bats, at bats, and hits. So I want my tab order to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So let's do that right now. So view tab order. Again, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Believe that that's all correct now. So one more view tab order. All right, so those are all done. We don't have to do this yet, but let's very quickly just come in here, run the program, make sure it's in the center of the screen. Oh, I didn't set my program run, which I can do right now. So I'm going to click on Pretest 2-2, right mouse click on it and choose Set as Startup Project, and now run it. And there it is. And it looks like, yeah, it looks like it's working to me. Good. All right. So let's put in the code that we know we have to put in. And the only thing that we want to clear out are these 3 fields. So the at-bats, the hits, and the average. The exit will be what we always do. So they'll be calculate. There will be clear. So that'll be txt at-bats.text equals double quote, txt hits.text equals double quote, txt average.text equals double quote, and txt at bats dot focus. Should be it for that one. All right. That's clear. And for our exit, again, I'm going to steal that code as I always do. So with all of that done, I should be able to come in here now and at least test my first 2 buttons. Or my last 2. So put in something there, put in something there. Click over here so I'm on that field, click clear. All right, it clears everything and it puts my cursor back. Exit no, exit yes. All right, so all of that's done. That's a good start. So what is left to do here, what is left to do is to put in the code. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean these up. All right, and I'm going to add back in, as I did last time, my comments. All right, and let me grab those comments. They're right here. You may not or may not be able to see what I'm doing. It's no big thing one way or the other. I'm just copying it in from the clipboard. All right, so I now have all of that is now done. And on here, I have set the tab order. I have set the accept button. I have set the start position and the cancel button. I have renamed the form, and this is my program prologue. So these are out of the way. So I've got to do this. And you'll notice that now, again, I'm going to have to do 2 more things of verification. I'm going to have to verify hits is not empty. Hits is numeric. Hits is positive or 0 or more. And you can't have more hits than you have at bats. So in other words, you can't be up to bat 10 times and get 15 hits. For at bats, I have to verify again that it's not empty. I've got to verify that it is numeric, and I've got to verify that it has a value of 0 or more. I'm going to do that in a minute. While we're doing this, then, once we've got a batting average that makes sense, we're going to keep track of the highest, the lowest, and the total number of the ones calculated. Those things right there will be what we end up putting in here. All right, so it is a C# GUI program that allows the user to input hits and at bats. Really should have probably changed the order of that, but that's fine. And we're calculating the batting average. All right. So in baseball, as it says, I'm doing this backwards, I realize it, but a player's average is calculated by dividing their hits by their at-bats. So if you were up to bat 10 times and you got 4 hits, your average would be a .400. Typically, as it says stated, your average is 400. All right, so we can get started now. Okay. So might as well do the at-bats first. Don't have to do that. We could do the hits first, but I'm going to do the at-bats first. That's just the way I'm going to do it. All right. I am going to declare a few global variables in here. So there are no constants. Declare global, or again, typically called class level variables. Okay, there will be 3 of them. An integer for the total number of averages. Set that equal to 0. There'll be a double for the highest and a double for the lowest. All right. So let's put in here double, highest, batting average. All right, I'm going to set the highest average in here. I'm going to set it equal to 0. And I'm going to have a double for the lowest batting average. If you were up to bat 10 times and you got 10 hits, your average would be 1,000, and that's what 1,000 looks like. All right. And notice I made these doubles. I could make them decimals. It doesn't matter. Either one of them would work fine in here. All right. These are grayed out because as of right now, I haven't used them yet. All right. So just like we did before, we're going to have a Boolean flag called keep going. And we're going to set it equal to true. And again, I'll just put in here flag. Okay. Now, I've done this lecture before where people have said to me, why don't you just call that then like continue? Because continue is a key word. I could call it flag, but keep going, I just thought really made some sense. So I'm going to say keep going equal validate at bats not empty. And again, we'll get an error because we have not yet written that. So I'm going to write that right down here. It'll be a public or private rather, private bool. Okay, so that error is gone, but I get a new one as we did before because I'm not returning anything yet. All right, so what are we going to do? We're again going to come in and say bool retval equal true. I'm going to just jump down to the bottom and say return retval. Now all my errors will be gone. I have no errors now, but I have to come in and say this. If txt at bats, all right, and what about that txt at bats? Well, if txt at bats dot text dot trim is equal to nothing, to nothing, we know that they left that blank. So we're going to call our show message, which we haven't written yet, and we're going to pass in there at bats cannot be empty. Empty at bats. All right, let's quickly go down to the bottom and write that show message routine. So that'll be a private void show message, and we'll take in a string, which is the message itself, and another string, which is the title. All right, and we'll do a message box dot show. And we will show what? Well, we will have the message, then the title, then we'll have the buttons, which will just be an OK, and we'll have the icon. And that'll be error. Okay. Now we should be able to handle nothing right now. We should be able to handle nothing in at bats except, yeah, we want to call show message, but then what do we want to do? Well, we want to go and say txt at bats dot focus. txt at bats, not bata, bats dot focus. All right. And some extraneous blank lines in there, so let's get rid of those. So let's see if that works. Nothing in at bats, empty at bats. At bats cannot be empty. Well, that's a good start. But you'll notice it doesn't yet handle that. It doesn't yet handle this. And it doesn't yet do anything when it's valid. You got to write those next. So, all right. We got all this. Keep going. Okay, so if keep going, the next thing we want to do then is we want to say keep going equals validate. We did not empty, but now we have to validate that it's numeric. So validate at bats is numeric. All right. Else here, that means that we returned false, so return. All right, we haven't written this yet, so let's write this right now. Like we did before, we're going to have three variables in here now. We're going to have our bool ret val, which will be equal to true. All right, we're going to have another bool called result. I'm not even going to initialize that. And not another bool, and a double, which we will call, what do we want to call that? We'll call it at bats. That's fine. All right. In fact, let's make more variables here. We'll have one. We don't want these to be doubles. One int, because you can only have whole number at bats. So at bats, and we'll set that equal to 0. And another int, which we'll call hits, and we'll set that equal to, hits, we'll set that equal to 0. Okay. All right. So we don't need this anymore. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say result equals txt, try parse, try dot parse. I don't remember now. What was it over here? So it's double dot try parse. right? What are we parsing? TXT at bats dot text. If it works, what are we putting it into? We're putting it into at bats. Just like that. And in fact, remember that's a whole number. So we can say int 32.tryparse. There we go. All right, if it returned false, that meant that indeed it was non-numeric. So there's something in there, but it's non-numeric. So we'll again call show message and say at bats must be numeric. Non-numeric at bats inputted. We should now be able to run that one and see if that works. Oh, here we got to say, also say what retval equal false. And we want to say txt at bats dot text and clear that out, and txt at bats dot focus. And at the bottom, we want to return retval. All right, so let's see now if we've got them both handled, or two of them handled. Let's see, I'm getting an error. I didn't put a semicolon at the end of that line, so let's run it again. So if there's nothing in there, empty at bats cannot be empty. All right, and we still got the non-numeric. Don't worry about that, but we'll put in something non-numeric. Non-numeric at bats inputted. All right, so that's being handled. All right. So let's see. We've got that. We've got that. So I don't think there's no range check on here. All right. But it does have to be positive. All right. So I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to say if keep going, keep going equals validate at bats is positive. Again, it'll give me an error because I haven't written it yet. All right. Else return. Let's write this one. This one's easy to do. We already know it's numeric because we checked that. We checked that here, that it was numeric. All right, so we're going to come down here. We're going to say private bool, validate that it's positive. All right. And this, like I said, will be simple. And it's going to say bool, oops, try that again. Bool retval equals true if at bats is greater than, I'm sure, so say it's less than 0, then retval equal false, txt at bats dot text, blank that out, and txt at bats dot focus. And finally return retval. All right, now we should have everything covered. If there's nothing in there, empty at bats, gotta fix that because it's still doing the other one. All right, if there's there, non-numeric, and if it's if it's negative. Well, that isn't being called, so let's make sure it is. Validated bats is positive. Thought that's what I called it. Validated bats is positive. Oh, if it was out of range, we never called that. So if it's less than 0, we want to call show message. And we want it to say at bats must be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, and our title will be negative at bats inputted. So let's double check that now. And if I put in negative at bats input, okay. All right. The only thing that I didn't like that was in here was when we ran this and the not empty. All right. We never said here, ret val equal false. That's why it ran 2 of them. Okay, so all of that's done. Now we want to do our hits. All right, you'll notice that bats does not have the squigglies there because we've used it. We're going to use these in just a moment, but we're going to do hits next. So if we get down to this point here, the at bats is valid. So now we want to say if keep going, and we got to do the same stuff. We have to call validate hits is not empty. We haven't written it yet. That's why it's giving us the error. We will write that in just a moment. All right, I'm going to grab my at bats not empty and I'm going to copy it because it's almost the same thing. I'm going to come down towards the bottom here. Paste that in. So this is validate hits not empty. So this is txt hits. This is hits. This is hits. This is hits. I think that's everything. So let's check that out. Now, if we put something in here, but nothing in here, empty hits. Okay, so that's done. Alrighty. Then we want to check to make sure that hits is numeric. So I'm going to grab the other one and just copy it down in just a moment. So we've done the hits not empty. If keep going. And that should say keep going equals. Why I do that, I don't know. That should say keep going equals validate hits is numeric, which wasn't written yet, so we have to write it. That's why we're getting the error. Else return. So validate hits not empty. Validate hits is numeric. That one should now be done. So if we put a value in there, we put in something that's non-numeric here. Non-numeric hits inputted, so that works. All right. And let's see, what else do we have? So we had at bats. Actually, the at bats has to be not positive. It has to be less than or equal to. The hits has to be less than or equal to the number of at bats. Okay. So we're going to have one more of these. If keep going. Keep going equals validate num hits less than let's see, validate hits less than or equal to at bats. Boy, that's a long name, but that's fine. We'll put that down here. So long, I've got to copy it. All right. So if hits greater than at bats, well, that's not possible. Hits cannot be greater than at bats. I'm just going to put down impossible situation. Maybe that's not great, but that's what I'm going to put. And this will be txt hits. We clear out and txt hits there too. All right. So let's check all that. So if I put in something that's valid here, but nothing there, empty, not numeric, not calling that, so something is wrong. Have to fix that, and then we can do these. All right. If hits greater than at bats, you know, this is good because this gives me a chance. I'm going to come right here. All right. And I don't think I've set hits. I think that's the problem. Let me check to see if it was numeric. Oh, that should have said hits. That's probably the problem. Let's try that again. Empty. Non-numeric. There you go. Impossible situation. Okay, so we've got everything covered now. All right. So let's exit. And if we got down this far, then and it'll be an else returned. But if we got down this far, if it still keep going, now do the calculations. Give me an error because that I have not written that yet, so that eventually you'll get the squigglies. So let's go down to the bottom here. And we will call do the calculations. So private void, it's not going to return anything. Do the calculations. All right. So I've made variables. I have made variables for at bats and hits, but I'm going to make another one for average. And that will be a double average. I'll set that equal to 0.00. All right. Now the problem we're going to have when we run this is if I just do this, if I say average equal hits divided by at bats, all right, remember it's an int divided by an int. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to cast this into a double, and I'm going to even cast the other one. That's a little overkill, but I'm going to cast them both. And then I'm going to say txt average dot text equals AVG dot toString, and I want this to 3 decimal places because that's how you typically do average. So let's see if it works. So we'll put in here 10 and we'll put in here 4, and that should say 0.400. It does. Good. All right, so all we got left are these. Okay. So when we're doing these calculations, we can, what do we have here? We have, oops, what was that? We don't need that anymore, or that. We've got total number of averages, the highest and the lowest. Okay, let's just finish this up. So the total number of averages, we want to add 1 to that, so we can either say plus plus here or plus plus on the end. It won't matter. Or there's the other ways I've shown you too. Let's see. If average is greater than the highest batting average, and we've got a new high, then highest is equal to average. All right, and either way, we want to say txt highest average dot text equals average dot, or I'm sorry, equals the highest dot toString. And again, that'll be to N3. And then we want to do exactly the same thing here, but with the lowest average. So let me grab all this. Whoops. Let me grab all that text right there. Put that in and just change this to lowest. And this to lowest. Oops, I didn't want to change that one. This is it here. So if the average is less than the lowest, then the lowest is equal to that average, and txt lowest average is equal to the lowest. What does it like here? txt, that's probably a big L. There we go. Should be done, I think. Let's try and run it a few times. Now I've already run the error conditions, so I'm not going to run those again. So let's say you were up 10 times and you got 3 hits. Your average is 300. That should be printing out, and it's not. So let's fix that right away. txt total number of averages dot text equals total number of averages dot toString. It's an int, so there's no formatting to be done on there. So let's try running it again. All right, so 10, 5, 500, 500, 1. Let's get it. 20, 15, oops, 15. 15 out of 20 is like 800. So that should replace this one here, and this should become 2. Or I guess it's 750, but it did both of those. Let's say that you got 1 hit, so that should be 0.050 or something like that. That should be the new low, and that should be 3. Okay, appears as though it's working. So let's take just a couple minutes, go through the program from top to bottom, and then we'll just see where we are then. So taking it from the top, again, we did a baseball program where we calculated the average. All right. We kept track of the highest batting average, the lowest batting average, and the total number of averages calculated, which we stored and printed out in read-only text boxes. We verified for the hits and for the at-bats. For both of them, we did these. not empty, numeric, and 0 or more. And for hits, hits had to be less than or equal to the number of at-bats. All right, we had previously set the tab order, the accept button, the cancel button, and the start position. We had previously changed the name of our form and the form text, and this is our prologue. All right, so taking it from the top, these were our global or class level variables. You can see that as of right now, none of them have the green squigglies underneath, meaning that as far as we can see here, all of them are being used. That's good. That's what we want anyway. So, all right, I'm not going to put comments here, number of averages, highest, lowest, etc. Hopefully those all make sense. We've got our Boolean flag, which is doing a lot of duty in this particular program. We first want to validate that the at-bats are not empty. Then we want to validate the at-bats are numeric. Then we want to validate the at-bats are positive. All right, so those three things. If each one of those returns true, I go on. If any one returns false, I just return. Then when we come back here, we start going through with hits. We want to validate that hits is not empty, that hits is numeric, and that hits is, what did we do here before? It was at numeric. Okay, we don't have to check for it being positive. We just have to check to make sure it's less than or equal to the at-bats. Okay, if any of these return false, we just return, okay? But if we get down to the bottom here, we don't have to put a return after this. We could, but it makes no sense. It's going to return anyway because it's at the bottom when it hits that bottom curly brace. So if I got down to this point, I put in a valid number for at-bats and a valid number for hits. So I go in and do all that. Now, to validate that they're not empty, we trim it and we check to make sure that if it is equal to the empty string, then it is empty. So we set it to false, otherwise we just return true. For the numeric, we again do a try parse. In the last program, we did a decimal dot try parse, but we're parsing a whole number here. So it's an int32 dot try parse. What are we parsing? The at-bats. All right. Where are we putting the results? In at-bats. If it returned false, that means it's trying to parse something that was non-numeric. So we give an error message. We set our return value to false. We take that at-bats field and we clear out whatever was in there and set the focus back. And we return at the end. For the at-bats positive, all right, we just want to say if the at-bats is less than 0, we show them an error message. All right, we set the return value to false, and we take the at-bats text box, clear it out, and set the focus there. All right, for the hits not empty, same kind of thing we did for at-bats not empty. So we grab what was in that text box, trim it, and check to make sure it's not equal to the empty string. If it is, we say hits cannot be empty. All right, we set the focus and we get out by setting red value equal to false. Then we check to make sure hits is numeric. So again, we're doing another try parse. We're parsing this time txt hits. We're taking the output, putting it into the hits. If that output returned false, we again call show message and say hits must be numeric. We set our red val to false, and we take our hits text box, clear it out, and set the focus. All right, then return red val. Then again, we want to check and make sure that the number of hits we put in was less than or equal to the number of at-bats that we put in. All right. If hits is greater than at-bats, that's an error condition. So I put down impossible situation, set red val to false, set my text box for hits to the empty string, and put my focus there. Then we return the red val. So if we get down to here, it's going to do all of our calculations. This is calculating the average and then putting in the text box, updating the number of averages that have been calculated and put that in the text box. Then we check to see if we've got a new high, and if we do, it becomes our new high. And print out that value in its text box, and we do the same thing. to see if we've got a new low average. Clear is just clear, and exit is just exit, and our show message is going to allow us to print out a customized error message. What I'm going to do is, not this second, but in just a couple minutes, I'm going to go back and write comments before each one of these methods. Make sure you know what's going on in there. Now, tomorrow, okay? I don't want people to take this test Monday and think I'm just totally flipping lost. All right. So what we're going to do tomorrow, I'm going to just grab it right now, as soon as I can find it. There it is. All right, let's quickly, and I mean quickly, let's first look at the homework. All right. For chapters 4 and 5, make this bigger. Not that big. There's 2 problems for chapter 4 and 3 for chapter 5. Calculate area and perimeter, accumulate test score data, calculate the factorial of a number, calculate change, and calculate income tax. I'm going to do one of these 2 from chapter 4 and probably the calculate change from chapter 5. I will do those tomorrow morning, boom, when we first start. Yes, it's a lab day, but you know, part of your labs are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems. We're going to be doing 2 of them. All right. Then we will look at the labs. And there's our 4 and 5 labs. I guess it's in 2 different things. Oh, there's 3 of them here. And I'll let you know tomorrow exactly what's doing here, okay? So don't worry about that. Yeah. All right. Write a console app that accepts an indefinite amount of test scores and computes statistics about them. We've already done that kind of thing, so I probably won't do that one. Implement the same thing as a GUI. Write a console app that tracks the sales of 3 homes. Redo that as a GUI. Write a console program that prints out a multiplication table. All right, I'm not sure which of those we will do, but at least one of them. Next. Kept that open, but I didn't. That's the first one. That was the one we just looked at. Then we've got more problems. Now, I try to be fair in here. I'm not saying I always am, but I'm telling you I try to be. I'm not going to make you do 800 different problems in here. All right. But at the same time, you got to do enough to demonstrate that you understand what's going on. All right. Now, what I am going to do, I will mention this again tomorrow. So tomorrow I will go over somewhere between 2 and 4 of these problems. The rest of the period will be lab. All right. Now, I want you to have a nice Labor Day. So I'm not going to give you the test on Tuesday. Tuesday will be lab for the entire period, and Wednesday will be the test. I will announce that. I will put that into the email I send out to you. But I just want everybody to hear that. All right. So you know what we'll be doing tomorrow. All right. You know what we'll be doing tomorrow. Again, we'll be going over some of those problems. I'm going to try to make sure that I take no more than a couple hours to do that. However many we do, be it, it's going to be either 2 or 3 or 4. All right. But I'm going to try to do them in 2 hours. And then, I'm picking out the ones that we do. All right. You will still have to do those. They're still assigned, but you have them there for you. Okay. And then the rest of the period will be lab. Monday, there is no class because it is the Labor Day holiday. Tuesday will be another lab day. Wednesday of next week, we will have the test. So next Wednesday, I think that's the 7th, we will have your next test. All right. Then Thursday of next week, we will go over at least chapter 6. And if there's time, 6 and 7. We'll just see how it goes. All right. Aiden, again, you're the only one on. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If I don't hear anything, totally fine. And I will talk to all of you tomorrow then. Thank you.